All right, so let's get started. Welcome to the Tableau user group. Thanks everybody for letting us know where you are from. And let's go through a quick agenda here. So we're going to learn a little bit about you today through a polling. Find out about your, a little bit about what your needs are or what you'd like to see in the TUG in the coming year. And then about your data governance strategy, if you have one at all. Then we're going to hear from an expert in data governance. How does it supercharge analytics? We'll learn about the events that are going around in the area. And if you know of some that we're not considering, you'll let us know. And then we will look at data management with Tableau, data governance tool there. And then there will be prizes. So we are giving away one of 3 books. I guess there's 3 prizes. We have 3 awesome books to give away. So when our presenters are speaking, instead of the chat, so let's keep the chat with more fun stuff. Where are you? What are you doing? What's for lunch? And then let's ask the questions in the Q&A panel. So if you ask questions in the Q&A panel, you pretty much entered yourself into being able to win a prize, one of the 3 books that we're going to be giving away. So please ask your questions, and we will, if we are able to answer them, we'll answer them along the way. Otherwise, we'll, at the end of each of the presenters' talks, we'll make sure that there is time for Q&A, and you can get the information from the experts. All right, so let's start out with a poll, and I'm gonna hand it over to Josh. You can use the QR code, or you can use the URL here, and you'll be able to answer the questions of our poll.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks, Olga. Yeah, this is a fun thing we do. So every user group that we have been doing it for quite a while. So we just like to get a little bit more information on you guys, and maybe have a little bit of fun and set our presenters up as well with a bit of information for them too. So give a few minutes, enter that in. If you are entering the URL, everything's lowercase in here, so it is case sensitive, but hopefully that doesn't throw you for a loop. Sometimes there's an uppercase in that, and it can catch you up, but this one should be pretty good. So all right, we're probably good. If anybody needs it, I can drop the URL in chat just so we have that as well, in case anyone's missing it. So drop that in chat, and then we can move on. Put that up here. All right, so I'm sure we got a few new people joining us, but I think there were some folks who attended the last session, which was last week. We had snafu a little bit in the middle of Theresa's presentation, which was a really good presentation on data governance, which we're absolutely going to make sure we get to today, and it gets all of the attention. But we had a little bit of snafu, and we shut it down, and weren't able to get it back up in time to sort of recover. So we rescheduled. So again, thank you for everybody who's joining us again to get this content. Thank you for all of the new people, right, that are joining in. We're always welcome to see new faces in here, and hopefully it's a little fun one to kick this off. So I think it was actually the hamsters, but I
think there's too many analysts in the group here.
Bees get a bad rap, so maybe we shouldn't include those, right? Got to save the bees. Grow those wildflowers. So, and of course we want to be a little snarky, but we love competition here, right? So all of the tools in the BI space are beneficial and really drive competition and it forward. But of course we can always think Tableau is the best.
We know.
We do.
All right. So I think everybody probably got that one wrong, because it was the hamsters. But don't worry, we got them some higher powered foods. So, all right, the next one is a bit more, we've had a lot of discussion internally with the group, the leader group here and across the space, but we want your input. What do you guys want to help us? We're in 2022, new year, right? What can we do to meet your needs? We've talked about a couple of things, right? More speakers. We always know that speakers are requested. We've got a good mix between the Madison tugs, the Wisconsin tugs, and the Milwaukee tugs. Is that the right balance? Right? Want to make sure we get that. In-person tug events. Now, I think we're still trying to figure out what that would look like, right? If you're familiar with the previous experience where we had, we would host it on site at one of the local organizations, and then we would have happy hour afterwards. I think we're still trying to figure out what that model looks like as companies sort of evaluate their policy of hosting, right? Or groups like this. Demo of complementary tools has come up a lot, as has collaboration with other local user groups. This would be, so should we have like a partner shared session with like Deltrix user group, or there's other ones like Data After Dark and some things that we'll put some actual information up on them, but we're interested to see where you guys stand. So cool.
Well, I think 12 is enough.
Kind of, I mean, obviously we want to make sure we're catering to you guys. So there isn't too much and then too little, and hopefully we're right balance. So the next questions are really targeted towards our audience, right? So are you aware of Tableau's data management offering? Right? So that's what we're going to have. Part of our focus discussion is going to be around that tool and how it can help your data governance. If you aren't aware, that's good. If you are aware and you're not using it, hopefully we'll give some information. We'll help you position that within the organization or give you some reasons why to bump that up a bit on your priority list. All right, and then how would you rate your company's data management system? So I'm sure a lot of people might, some of these might be too kind. Some of these might be pretty spot on, but just let us know what you think. Is it working for you? You guys are really good. Then, this is probably in a, you're going to only get so much out of this discussion, but I think a lot of us have a lot of experiences to, it's in Excel and yeah, it works great, but no, it doesn't. So.
Okay. Awesome.
All right. I think if it's functional, hopefully we can get some tips out of here how to make it better. All right. Where are you at in your data governance journey? So your maturity curve, where are you at? This is sort of scaling from the top of, we don't know what it is. We know we need it. We need help figuring it out, all the way down to, we really, delivering on. I know, Olga, you've had a lot of success in your organization, so you guys are probably maturing nicely on that curve.
Yeah, and it's amazing. It's a daunting task, but once you get going, I thought, I'd be behind. I'd be trying to get things done, and now I'm searching for, well, what other realms should we go into? What else should we define? So we've talked about it for a long time, and now doing it is incredibly rewarding. Okay.
And a nice bell curve here. So looks like we're in that stage of transforming. So
yeah,
they should get a lot of good content out of the talks today. All right, so this is more around tools, right? So what tools we're using. And of course, if you pick the other one and you want to share, throw that into chat. I think that would be good to share, to sort of share what tools you've got out there that you're using, if you found success with them or not.
Oh, so somebody's using Tableau.
I've seen their presentations before at some conferences. So.
Oh, okay. That's interesting.
Talent, Oval Edge.
Yeah.
A lot of others. Interesting.
Okay, that's awesome.
Type in the chat under others what you're using. I'm just curious. Yeah.
So we are using Oval Edge. That's my company, and we're rolling that out.
Oh, Informatica. That's a big one. We should have put that.
Yeah.
I'll bet they're all.
Oh, yeah. think I get Informatica and Calibra mixed up, maybe. Okay, all right. Thank you.
All right, and this one's around challenging parts of implementing data governance, right? As you're transforming, it's always hard to sort of figure out the right places to start, but maybe some of these are the areas where, you're struggling with, right? Top-down support, bottoms-up awareness and value articulation, putting a strategy together.
I do presentations on gaining executive support, if you guys are interested.
Mm-hmm. I know a lot of people are interested in that. I mean, the truth of it, no matter how good are the people, the tools, the information, you have to have that executive support. And I was lucky enough to come to a company where I had it, but that would be a great talk.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of topics that people are probably clicking a couple buttons on here. So
yeah. I did.
Okay. All right.
All right. I think this
We're
wraps
good
it,
to
right?
go.
I think we're at the end.
Yep,
So
that's it.
thank you guys. This is always a fun part of it here, right? We get a little bit of insight into the user group. We get to have a little fun, and then we get to set the presenters up to help personalize this information a little bit for the audience. So thank you again. All right, I'll hand it back to you, Olga.
All right.
Theresa.
Great. Well, thanks for contributing in the chat, and please continue to do so. But if you want to enter to get a book, please use the Q&A for questions. And I'd like to introduce Theresa Ansik. She's a data governance strategist and has been working in that realm for a few years and has built up a wealth of knowledge from, as she mentioned, how to get the executives on board to how to create a 360 full term description, not just, this is a mortgage for a house, but let's talk about it. Let's see the related terms and all of that. So welcome, Theresa, and I will let you take over.
Awesome. All right, I will share my screen. All right, so you should be looking at a white screen that says how data governance can supercharge your analytics. Everybody see?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, I'll get started. Click over here. Right, a little bit about myself. Like Olga said, I started more than a couple years ago, we'll say, on as a data architect, and data governance was emerging. And after that, I studied data visualization, which loved. So I've got familiar with a lot of tools. Some of those tools are not around today. And I love Tableau, lean into it, definitely. And then after that, data governance was an emerging concept. And I could see the need for it. So I latched on and I never let go. So now I'm an independent consultant for organizations. I call myself a strategist on data governance. It comes in a lot of different flavors, shapes, and forms, but still the same components are there. So what I try to say to people is that data governance is to data what the evolution of debit and credit accounting was to finance. So once you have it, you can't imagine going without it. And Olga definitely has worked with me, as she mentioned, the entire 360-degree walk around a term. The primary three spokes, sometimes when you look at the DMBOK, the Data Management Book of Knowledge, and they've got 10 dimensions and it can be overwhelming. So I try to take a little bit easier approach to it, and I'm very, very pragmatic in how I help people and organizations. So we focus on data access, data literacy, and data quality to start your data governance program. So what I'm going to talk about here, and part of my talk includes getting that executive buy-in and ways that I found in order to achieve that. But fully functioning data governance requires a shift in the culture of the organization as well. There generally is 4 flavors of it. There's the grassroots approach where you've got 2 or 3 people that are passionate about it. They know they want it. They want a tool and they're trying to evangelize it in their organization. And then there is the passive or unilateral data governance teams that are all withheld within one team. It's all in risk and compliance, or it's all in the BI team, or it's all in the analytics team, but they haven't invited everyone to the table yet. And then there's the progressive, where they've got everybody to the table and they're kind of walking through, evolving their backlogs, gaining transparency, and they're just struggling with some of the roadmap and the behavioral shifts that people reach out for help for. And then there's those people that have gotten through that part, and now we're trying to establish data governance as part of our everyday work, where a new report or a new dashboard, I'll stick with Tableau, a new dashboard doesn't go to production unless we have all the terms curated and we understand the lineage and we agree that the metrics are accurate and globally used. So that is the 4, horsemen of data governance, where people generally reach out to me. They usually fall into one of those 4 categories. So data quality, trustworthiness, and compliance is usually the first 3 drivers of data governance. So understanding what drives your desire for data governance is really important. What are you trying to achieve? You need to plug that into your roadmap early. And plug those holes. I had a company that lost several $1 million because they had a hiccup in their inventory where they could have closed a deal, but their inventory read 0, that they didn't have that item in their warehouse. Turns out they had 2 warehouses of that item. So they want that to never happen again. And it was because of a terminology hiccup that they were looking up the wrong thing. They thought it was called something else. So we want to be able to search for existing metrics. We want the terms to be the terms. We want to know what the best source of those terms are. We want to be able to profile the information so that we have transparency and we can see exactly where the information originates from in our organization. We want to know what application it's collected in. If there's interoperability where it travels between applications, we want to understand that travel and what processes can happen that would change that information once it's born into the ecosystem. We want to have more transparency over the business process. And we want to be able to have questions answered from people that are curious and they need to know who to reach out to. So, one of the stories that I share at my conference engagements is how you can get traction with your data governance by elevating the problem and then solving it with data governance. So I'm going to walk you through an experience that I had when I set up my tool. I was at a hospital chain, 8 different hospitals, and I took a look at the emergency room area, and they had 150 reports. So I downloaded all the reports and I said, give me the number of field titles on all their reports. So I was able to say, listen, you guys use length of stay 56 times on your report, and you've got 6 different ways that you're figuring it out. When I looked at the metrics on the report, it showed that there was 56 different ways. And it was easy to do because I had a data governance tool. I'm going to show you a little bit of that process right now by pulling this over. This is a Tableau. And you can see inside the tool that it acts just like it does if I were to be clicking on it through the Tableau interface. Here are the people that use that tool the most. I can reach out to any one of these individuals and ask them a question by clicking here. I have a quality index of -10. That tells me there's something going wrong with quality on this tool. I can click here and identify what the quality issue is before I make my decision on it. The terms, I added 1 term, but usually in something like this, the terms would be extensive. But if I had a question about a term, I could click here and it would take me to the term. The reason that this was created is often really good information. So the business description, by the way, Olga will tell you, my business descriptions are usually 5 paragraphs long, not 2 sentences. But this tells me who owns the report, why the report was made, when it went to production, the decisions that are being made based on this report, how many users have logged into this report, so that you have a full, like she said, 365 degrees of information about this asset. So it's really about wrapping your assets in governance. I can see the popularity rating here, how many columns are involved, and again, with the ownership. Data governance tools will often provide you with lineage. So these are the different Tableau components that show up on that in the Superstore summary. When you scroll back here, I can see that this information is coming from here and going into here. And this is being fed from the fact sales. If I click on here, whoops, come on, don't be so ticky. I can go here and I can see what columns are coming from there and how they're moving along in this process. I can see they're coming from a dimension called product. And if I want to go even further down, I can click here and it will give me the lineage that goes all the way back to the source in the ecosystem. And it will answer many, many questions. I can click on here and open the code. I can't change anything. And this is all metadata and I'm not looking at any PII. So you can open this up to all your analytics individuals. If I want to have a question about how it is, and this is how I found out, hey, this is the math here, copy, paste, go to the next one, open the thing. Oh, here's the math here. So a data governance tool will allow you to have that 365-degree approach to your assets. And it really is about curating your reports, curating your terms, and curating your assets. So what I did here, when I downloaded this, the word score shows up 85 times. We have a PCLV. I don't know what that means. Do we have an acronym library is my next question. No, we don't. How many acronyms are flying around? Is there any confusion? The answer is always yes, by the way. So I have a way that we pull all the acronyms into an acronym library, which makes onboarding new people a more enjoyable experience too, because you're saying here, this is the language we speak here. When you hear this, just look here and you'll know what we're talking about. So it reduces that 90 days of, what was that? Also, we've got the sales price at 72, but is that the sale price plus the tax, or is that the sale price minus the tax? What is it, the wholesale price? You really want to be able to say, these are the terms that you guys are using the most. And if you have a single self-service Tableau area, you can go in and say, these are the things that people are looking at the most, and fold your usage into this type of analysis so that you can really drill into what are your customers asking for. And let's make sure that that's where we prioritize our data governance approaches. Sometimes we have things like branch versus broker branch. Are they the same thing? As it turned out, we ended up with 4 different ways they were using the term branch when we helped this customer. So it was quite enlightening to show them what they're reporting on and how often it's showing up on the report. So this is also a really good way for you to create your terminology, your terms backlog, and do it very strategically. Oops. So when I presented the 6 different ways that we were calculating the length of stay for emergency rooms, sometimes it started at the insurance desk. Some start times were when they were escorted to the room in the back, and other times they didn't start the clock until the first clinical contact. And the same thing with the stopping of the clock. So I met with all of the leaders of the emergency room, the presidents from each hospital. I didn't invite them to a meeting where they wouldn't show up, because that's how it goes, because data governance is kind of dry. I horned in on another meeting they were having. You can use that too. So what I did is I horned in on another meeting. I presented a very quick rundown, and oh my gosh, they were out of their minds. They could not believe that they were making multi-million-dollar decisions based on length of stay. They were staffing, they were getting funding, they were right down to, renovations in the emergency rooms were being decided based on this metric that was being calculated differently. And it was being rolled up to the senior leadership with different metrics underneath. So one hospital was like, their length of stay looked terrible compared to this other hospital that's, amazing. But it's leadership sees length of stay, emergency room, they just assume that somebody's got it all pulled together correctly. So what happened from that experience, they went back to their respective locations and said, they assigned a person and they gave the authority and the demand that they start curating every single term across all of the hospitals. And after that, I started working with the leadership in that location to say, listen, I need you to start asking me if a metric is certified or not, because we're going to start stamping metrics with certified. And then that I've pulled it all together from all the locations. After I did those two things by elevating the problem and then solving it with data governance, I was able to get a lot of executive support. So what we had after that was increased reliability in their decision-making. They almost demanded my backlog exploded. And then they had a lot more confidence with data-driven decision-making as well. Some of the benefits and outcomes, and I'm going to circle back with Olga because I want to hear more about her experience, but there is an idea out there that data governance is going to slow your process. And to that, I say regularly, au contraire, mon frère, it actually gives you speed to market with your assets. It actually brings your capacity back. It actually supercharges your ability to create the top of the mountain analytics. So, and here's just a few reasons why I say that. So you've got increased confidence, you've got reusable code. So when we curate a term and we say, this is the definition of the term, here is the metric, we are going to publish that in our catalog. And if you're going to use that, you have to use this math. If you're not using that math, you're not going to production with that anymore. So you're getting reusable code and you're getting transparency in your terms. You're getting alignment with your strategic objectives. Am I over time, Olga? No? You're on mute. I can't hear you.
You're good. I just wanted to nod because this is
so important.
Good. Yeah.
You're getting alignment with your strategic objectives. So, people are saying we want to lean into Tableau, we want to lean into self-service, but people are still asking for reports. So now when the reports get asked for, we are no longer just hitting it with the hammer we know. We're saying, hey, does that stuff exist in the self-service? No, but if we add these two fields into the data mart, it's going to show up in Tableau and be much more powerful. And that is way cheaper than running another report and then maintaining that technical debt. So we end up pushing that strategy for the organization, for the CIO, and for everyone into more of a self-service, which is where we want to take the organization to. And we're certifying things one time. I'm not trying to certify 25 different reports. You've got improved throughput and speed to market because we've published code and said, here, if you're trying to get this, this is the best place to get it. Sometimes there's two best places, but I don't have developers trying to figure out where that is. And I don't have BI analysts trying to talk to somebody who requested that information to get their version of what they thought they were asking for and then go forward with that. So things start really lining up. You've got more efficient data transportation and handling because you've standardized it. When we publish reusable code, I make sure that it's not crummy code, right? You've got increased engagement and analytical capability. So you're able to, the Tableau analysts are able to expand what's available to them in the data lake and in the data warehouse, in the data marts, much more efficiently than they ever did before. And you've got you're preserving your server resource space and capacity. And then your IT capacity starts coming back too, because there's that point where you cross over and your report requests plummet and your analytic usage goes way up. And then it goes way, way up because you are no longer carrying these reports and having problem tickets come in and confusion, and you've got the ability to really supercharge, hence the name of my presentation, supercharge your analytics through data governance. So that's the goal. And when we get to that point, you will feel it and you will know it. So that is my presentation. Do we have any questions? Does anybody have any questions that are specific to how they're doing data governance? I can field those as well.
Yeah, go ahead and use the Q&A if you have questions or you want to comment. Or we did have one comment talking about lineage. So is lineage how a term is used? Is it more about where it's stored? What do you tell people when you talk about lineage?
When I talk about lineage, I almost always have to demonstrate it because it sounds good, but it's a really dry conversation. Honestly, it's boring. I used to host open mics and do music, and I'm like, oh, lineage. It's really boring. But when you get into the point where you're actually demonstrating it and you see this is when people get really excited. It's about both data movement. So each one of these represents data movement into something else, into another location. So you can see the location here. This is on the SSIS database, and this is an ETL that's moving that data into this data customer. So if I have a question and I'm on the data governance team, and somebody on the analytics team calls and says, hey, help me understand where this is coming from, I can go in here, and usually the analytics folks are pretty good at SQL or reading code, whether it's SQL or anything else, JSON, whatever. You can click on here, open the code, and take a look at how that's flowing. You can see a lot of times you get your question answered just by looking at the details in this teeny tiny blue line here that I showed you earlier, where you can actually see the column mapping. It's coming address and it's moving address into the city field. So it looks like they're probably just pulling the city out of the address and then separating it into another field. So it really allows you to say, oh, that's coming from this. And if you want to get into where it's coming from all the way to its source, I can actually tell you what application it's coming in on. Looks like it came in on Salesforce originally, but it's getting transported over to the the transaction application. And that's where that travels to and from. So you can really get an idea of where your information is coming from and going, and ensure that it is coming from the proper location. Now, this is just lineage coming from one Tableau thing, but when I do an analysis on a term in the reports, I'm actually doing analysis where on this side, I've lined up that term and I've got 20 reports on my screen down to that term on the 20 reports. And then I look at lineage all together for those 20 terms. And I'm like, whoa, it looks really scary and confusing and like spaghetti at first. But what you get from that is you can say, and I always boil it down and digest it before I hand it over to the data stewards. And I say, you guys, most of the time you're getting it from over here, but this is coming from here and this is coming from here. Most of the time, this is your metric calculation, but you're also calculating it like this and this. And when we curate that information, it goes into the backlog so that we can align it with the new policy for that term, which is policy. When we publish the term and we publish all of the requirements of that term, that becomes the policy. Anything that falls outside of that policy can get another term, but you can't use that term. So we're going to go open that report. We're going to change the field title, or we're going to make the logic underlying logic of that report adhere to the policy. And then we're going to put our certification stamp of approval on that term so they know that they can be confident about it.
Awesome, thanks. Yeah, it's so helpful, and for me, in many ways, you can have someone in audit look at a term and see the exact reports that it shows up in Tableau. And then they can go further and say who has access to those reports. And as a developer, you can ensure and quickly figure out where that term on the dashboard, you could find out the actual raw field of the system that you pulled it from. So it's pretty powerful.
Yeah.
For all different groups, I think, in the industry to be able to work on. One more question here. What is your definition of backlog?
Ooh, with data governance, I usually end up with, generally speaking, because everybody's different, but I usually end up with 5 backlogs. The data governance committee has a backlog of terms that they're curating. So every time we meet, we say, okay, we're going to take on these 2 or 3 terms during this next sprint, if you will, but it's 2 weeks. And then we do the data custodian does the analysis of the term. The data custodian comes in and says with the data steward, and that term shows up on 17 reports. These are the different places that it's coming from. Sometimes it's called this and sometimes it's called this. I've noticed that there's other things over here. So they bring to it that IT analysis. And the data steward will then go say, hey, that data shows up in the ecosystem during this business process. It's put in by these people. It's changeable when this happens. So we're really bringing transparency to the IT staff that I've never had access to. It's always back-end information. I don't know how they're putting that information into what transaction system. And, you know, I'm kind of working based on whatever my customer is asking for in terms of information. So you're yoking those 2 folks together. And then we've got a data owner who provides leadership for that data governance committee. So it's really about taking, and then we bring in the security and we say, what's the security about this? Is this the recipe for Coca-Cola? Probably shouldn't share that. And then we say, is there quality issues with this? And then we say, okay, this is how the quality problems we've had with this. So I have a backlog for quality where we put in quality routines as close to the source as often as possible. Share that with the business. I have a backlog for the terms. I have a backlog coming from the data governance committee for what I want to move into the warehouse. And I have what else? Security backlog. You know, there's 5 of them. I can do a whole thing on backlogs and how a data governance committee meeting gets pulled together if you're interested in that at a future session, and where I can really get more involved with that conversation. But yeah, there's a lot of backlog information. There's a backlog, oh, the big one, the reports that need to be changed in order to fit the policy. I'm not going to open a report 16 times every time I get a new term curated. I'm going to let it pile up for like 10, and then we're going to go and then put it out there, certify it. So there is a backlog of reports that we find that are not valid. Sometimes we shut them down completely.
All right, thank you. So much good information. It's amazing how those data governance committee meetings go. You'll find sometimes that something just, a business issue becomes critical, and all of a sudden you're switching gears and you're talking about those terms, or you know, the way that things spin off and the direction you're going. You just have to be flexible and always have those backlogs so you know how to get back on track. So ours were going too well that I just needed to cancel a meeting or 2 because I had to catch up. Well, thank you very much, Theresa. And I would encourage, if anyone would like to find out more, to reach out to Theresa. I'm happy to field questions too, or talk about what we've done. Okay, and I am going to.
Ooh, that's a good one, Richard.
Did you see it? Go ahead and I'm going to bring the screen up if you want to go ahead and answer that.
Yeah, important differences in improvising data governance or improving data governance between small and large organizations. Yes. Yes, there's quite a bit of difference. And sometimes you actually have a little bit more ability to be lean in the smaller organizations. They don't tend to have the giant number of, I just worked with somebody that had 4,000 reports and they didn't even know they had 4,000 reports on their server. And the bigger organizations, we tend to have to reach out and have more communication planning. The smaller organizations, you've got half of the team involved in some point of the conversation. So the communication planning becomes really imperative, and also your success metrics in bigger organizations. So if they're going to invest in data governance, how many terms do we have curated? How many items are in the backlogs? How much tech debt are we retiring? Where's our PII and PHI being tagged? Do we have it all done? And how are we doing on audits? There's a lot of success metrics that become moved up and more important in planning when you're with a larger organization. Whereas the smaller organizations, we can pull the information together, put it on a PowerPoint and send it on up.
All right, thank you, Theresa, and awesome information.
Thank you for having me.
Very, very valuable. Let's talk about events in the area. So the first event I have listed is complete, but it is worth mentioning the Wisconsin Women in Technology Group. Keep an eye out for events. They're always having events in different parts of the state. The Wisconsin TUG, Q2 TUG, will be April 28th, virtual. And the next Milwaukee TUG will be in May. The other events that I wanted to talk about in more detail, the Tableau Conference, Data Book Club, Data Ideas, and I'm not sure if, I think some of you may be using Talend. There is a Wisconsin Talend user group that my coworker has started up. So that is going on. There's Alteryx user groups as well. If you want to add in the chat, please, if you want to talk about or communicate some others, please do so. So the Tableau Conference is May 17th through the 19th, and there is a limit. So there's 5,000 people limit. And if you've ever been to the Tableau Conference, that's quite small for a Tableau Conference. So if you are going to go, I would suggest, I believe March 15th is when registration is open to go for that. It has been a while since I've been to a Tableau conference, and I'm very much looking forward to getting there. Again, chat with us if anybody is going to go. It is in Las Vegas at, I believe it's the Wynn. And the other event to talk about, Brandy Beals, one of the leaders of the TUG, hosts a book club. And this spring, the book club is Upstream, the quest to solve problems before they happen. And I don't know if any of you have been in it in the past. There have been some great books that they've gone through before. And she was able to get, on a few occasions, the author to come in and talk as well. So that's a great time to share information and get information from the experts themselves. Dustin Schimik, who you may know, Dustin has been a part of the TUG for quite a while, probably 5 years, as long as I can remember. And he was at Masterlock most recently and helped us to host a few events there. So he is heading up Data Ideas, and he's really looking to highlight what's going on in the area in terms of analytics. Let's share information. What cool things are going on in the analytic world? How do we, what are people doing for their Salesforce? Are you benchmarking? How are you creating these visuals? What are the calculations you're using? So I would think of it, if we have Tableau Public for visualizations, maybe there's some kind of area that Dustin's going to create to share more about the analytics of what's going on. And then I would like to introduce you to Jupiter from Tableau. He is a lead solutions engineer at Tableau, and he is going to talk about and walk us through Tableau's data management. So I'll go ahead and shoot it over to you, Jupiter. And again, if you have questions, please use the Q&A, and we'll make sure that we get that answered, and you will be entered to win one of the 3 books that we have available. All right.
Awesome. Thank you, Olga. Much
Yep.
appreciated. Let me take control of the screen. This should be okay. Perfect. Okay. Here we go. Okay, great. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me today. So the goal for today is to kind of talk about Tableau's data management add-on a little bit, but overall just talk about analytics governance and kind of how we've built our tool and platform to kind of become, the self-serving data governance platform. As you know, being a self-serving analytics platform, that's kind of our goal for data governance as well. Let's just kind of go through the agenda. It's pretty straightforward. We're going to start with just an overview of the tool set, kind of the offerings, go through some slideware, talk through some use cases, things like that. We'll do a demo. Hopefully, it's a guided, very easy demo, very quick. And actually, I'll share a link. You guys can go through it yourselves as well. We have a demo environment that you can kind of play around with a little bit, if that's of interest to you. And then we'll have a Q&A at the end. Hopefully, we'll have enough time. I think we should. I'm going to try to breeze through the slides and make sure we can kind of have time for question and answer. But if there are questions that come up during the presentation, please feel free to put them in the Q&A section of the chat, as Olga mentioned, and we'll go from there. Okay, so I talked about this a little bit briefly, but basically, we're really trying to create that convergence. We're trying to kind of do what we did with analytics, right? We changed the paradigm for self-serving analytics, and now we're trying to do it for data practice as well. And we believe that both of these things can be democratized and governed at scale. And we've actually provided a framework for being able to accomplish this through our offering. So, just kind of talking through each of these, when you see these topics, you see that there's a lot of one-off solutions in the market for a lot of these things. So data cataloging, preparation, virtualization, and analytics. And you have, a lot of different offerings for these these skill sets and these required things. But, independently, they don't really, they're useful independently, but they don't really solve the job if you have to use 5 different tools to accomplish these things. And so, with cataloging, you need cataloging, obviously, to improve the understandability and support analytics. You need data prep to combine and reshape your data. And you want to find, data, you want to be able to just connect to it, right? So you need that virtualization to be able to grab the data that you need at any point in time. And so when you combine all of these things into one platform, you do get that self-service platform that's going to supercharge your ability to kind of do analytics at scale. So let's talk about a little bit on how kind of we view our platform. It's three different things, right? So and we'll talk through each of these independently, but we're looking to create, govern, and verify, right? And the way that our products kind of fit into this, as many of you might be, some of you might be familiar, I should say, with Tableau Prep. It's currently included with Tableau Desktop, depending on the license key you have. But Tableau Prep is kind of like our data ETL, data prep, reshaping data type tool. It's very useful to kind of connect to different data sources, be able to come in and clean it up, filter, do any sort of new variable creation that you need to do, any sort of join, and then exporting it out ready to go into Tableau or wherever you're planning on doing your analysis. The next 2 parts, again, may be a little more newer for you all unless you've worked with data management in the past, but looking at governing, catalog and metadata is kind of where that comes to fruition. You need to have the ability to kind of understand what your data is, know more about it, learn about it, and make sure that it's the latest and greatest and that it's actually what you need to do your analysis. There's the whole concept behind a single source of truth. The last thing we want to do in an organization is if we ask 3 different teams, tell us what the profit loss was for a certain product, last month, we should have ideally the same answer. And a lot of times with ungoverned data sets, you don't really get that verification. And so it does become very important to kind of have that. And that kind of brings me into verify, right? At the end of the day, when you use a data source, you want to know that it's actually the single source of truth and that it's not a one-off kind of created to, maybe do some further analysis. You want to have everyone using the same exact data source to kind of get those same numbers when it comes to certain tasks. So I'm kind of going to go through this in a way that kind of outlines some of the unique challenges we see in data governance and data management, and kind of how, again, we've approached our solutions to kind of solve those things. So the first challenge is the unknown data driving analytics, right? We know that for a lot of times when you're working with data, you may not even realize how much of it you have. And so obviously it can become a very large process when you're dealing with billions and billions of rows, thousands of different data tables, and it's very hard to keep track of what all is out there. And I think it doesn't really help when you're working with spreadsheets, because at the end of the day, if you open up a data set in a spreadsheet, it might lead to, data quality challenges. It's very hard to kind of trace what's going on in those data sets. It might create, different points of view that were unintended. And so it really does tend to be a risky play to work with spreadsheets when it comes to data governance and data management. And we've seen this in our previous presentation. We kind of outlined some of other tools that are very useful and kind of processes to really be able to properly have good data governance. And so the spreadsheet problem is truly, I guess, something that some companies do face. But for Tableau, prep and catalog is kind of where we kind of try to take that issue and basically bring it to fruition with our analytics. So, with these two products combined, you're able to understand where the data came from. You're able to understand, what changes were made to the data once it was brought into prep. You're able to understand, hey, are there data quality issues right now? Is it out of date? Is it a couple of months old? Do I need to refresh? You're able to see exactly how things were built. Isn't it frustrating when you get a calculation and you're just not really sure how it was calculated? Because you might look at it and say, that doesn't really make sense to me. This seems off, or this number is just doesn't seem like. You try to calculate it yourself and suddenly you get a different answer. Now you're wondering to yourself, well, how was this calculated? I need to understand that. And so that, our tools give kind of visualization into that. So for sure that when you're doing these analytics and you're using these calculated fields, that you're using the correct one and it's being done properly. And finally, you get to see kind of where the data went, right? With our tools, you're able to see exactly where you're writing your files to. You're able to then track that lineage back, see the combination of different data files that were built to create your one data source. And again, that's something that we do through prep. One thing you'll see is that most data workers are analysts. So this is the second challenge, not engineers. If we look through LinkedIn, we'll see that there's about 10.6 million LinkedIn users with SQL skills. So those are your data engineers. You can go into the warehouses, do queries, pull data to be able to do for analysis. However, there's 52 million LinkedIn users with Excel skills. And so, basically that becomes problematic because a lot of our ETL tools, if not most of them, are actually designed for an engineer. They're not really designed with an analyst in mind. They're not user-friendly. They do require some coding. And so giving your employees the right tools that match their skill set will enable them to get value out of the data, right? And it's going to allow them to answer those critical questions and help stabilize the business. And so Prep Builder actually does make that self-service ETL easy. It has the familiarity sense of what you would get with Tableau if you haven't used it in the past, but everything is drag and drop. Everything is kind of outlined for you step by step as you take it. So you'll see the steps you've taken. You'll get to go in and make changes if you need to. You can kind of have that set up so that once you've built out your hearing is static. I don't know if that's me or can everyone still hear me?
Yep, we hear you, Jupiter.
Okay, perfect.
You're good.
I just wanted to make sure. No, I'm all good. Okay, perfect. So as I was mentioning before, Prep Builder does bring that familiarity of drag and drop. It gives you real live visual updates of how your data is changing as you're making those changes. Let's say you need to group things together, you'll get automatic changes. You'll see automatic data quality. if you're having, if you see a lot of missed data sets, or sorry, a lot of missed rows in your columns, and you'll get to see that kind of as a one-off in the actual kind of building of the data source. Okay. Now, the third challenge is finding the right data, right? So basically, at the end of the day, when you have a question that you'd like to kind of answer, it really can become tedious, and it really does become very annoying if you don't know what the right data set is. It requires tracking down, like I have to reach out to Jim and in the data steward team and kind of get time that he has available to kind of ask him about some of the different options we have. I have to go to other channels, potentially do a lot of, then cleaning up of data, combining. And so it can take a very long time to get all of that done. And ultimately that could end up being 80% of the work, when in reality, I think a lot of us would rather be doing a lot more of the visualization and leverage that time to kind of explore the data even further to gain further insight. And so having a tool that's going to help you find the right data is critical, or at least making it easy to find the right data. And so that's where our catalog comes in. The beauty of our catalog is it really automatically ingests all of your data in your Tableau environment into one central list. There's no need on your end, on your engineers' ends, to set up an index schedule or to configure any sort of connectivity. Basically, anything that's been uploaded into Tableau or has been used in Tableau or has been, uploaded into Tableau by your admins or whoever's kind of in charge of your data process, it'll all be in one view that you can then go in and explore, right? So we kind of see a front end of what this looks like. It's very straightforward. It kind of talks through the name of the data source. It shows the workbooks, and it then goes through some of the other things that are important, right? It shows kind of a quick view of all the columns. If you click into it, you even get more detail. And it's the nice thing about this tool is it's searchable. So if you're looking for something in particular, you can search and it'll do the keywords. It automatically ingests metadata. And of course, it also provides kind of certifications and warnings. So if you're looking for a data source and you want to make sure that it's the single source of truth that you're getting, you'll want to look out for those certified data sources that would be kind of like administered as, the person uploading it would say, okay, I've gone through the process of building out this process correctly. I've had it audited. Now, whenever I do the refresh, I'm going to certify this is the single source of truth that I'm looking for. At the same time, you also want to be able to see, the right details to drill down at. And so kind of talking through, I've already kind of covered most of these, but you can kind of see a better view of what details you get right off the bat in the catalog. And so looking at, what the connection type is. So where are you getting this data from? You're understanding, you can take action on this data source as well. You can make sure that it's certified. And at the end of the day, you can also see where it's coming from, right? So you want to make sure it's coming from the correct source. And that's very important when it comes to kind of deciding which data source you're going to pick. Especially, when we're looking at this, we see that there's a lot of data here. I mean, here you can see 157 different databases and files. Having a place where you can index and search and having it all organized in one place is critical, especially when you're working with a lot of different data warehouses. So in this case, we're looking at Excel, Snowflake, SQL Server. You want to make sure that you have a place for all of that. And that's kind of what this tool helps to do. The next thing you want to do, right, as I mentioned before, once you've kind of picked out your data set, you want to be able to say, okay, well, I need to look even further and understand what's kind of happening here. And so being able to surf lineage to find the existing assets is actually very important. Let's say you've actually created, you've seen a workbook that has a lot of good information and it's done some stuff that maybe you want to explore a little further. By using lineage, you don't have to go and say, well, now I have to create a brand new data set to accomplish the same task. I'm going to go into the workbook, or I'm going to go into this view, and I'm going to figure out what data sources were used to build it. And by doing that, it kind of saves you time and not having to, go through that process yourself. And essentially, it allows you then to kind of start from that existing data source, which again, as long as you're certifying correctly, you'll know that it's a data source that has validity and is good to use when it comes to single sources of truth and cleaning up the data. The next challenge that we're looking at here is the dangers of the disjointed experience. And I've definitely covered that a little bit, so I'm not going to spend too much time. But as we know, again, we want to make sure that everybody has the same single source of truth. And I know I keep saying that word. We should probably play a bingo of how many times I say it today. But it's very important, right? You want to make sure that everyone's getting the same result, because at the end of the day, the worst thing that you can have is an executive meeting where 3 people come and have completely different answers to the same question. It's going to be a very frustrating experience for everyone involved. So that's kind of key. And that's where, again, I've been talking about it a little bit, but the certifications and quality warnings that we offer in our data source. So the certification itself is going to be something that you do like your data steward, your data admin, whoever's kind of bringing that data source into Tableau would do. But the data quality warnings can kind of be set as like an automatic trigger. And so basically it allows you to kind of go through and say, listen, if this data source is something, that's going to be retired soon, it's going to be moved over. Let's say it's out of date because we've actually gone from migrating SQL Server onto Snowflake, but we're still keeping SQL Server active for a while. Then if someone's using that SQL Server data set or database, they want to be familiar with, as of March 1st, this data set will no longer be updated. If you want anything for over March 1st, please refer to the Snowflake database instead. And so those sort of warnings can be placed into the data to kind of allow for the users to tread lightly when it comes to choosing what they're going to be using for their analytics and their analysis. The next point we want to talk about is certifications and warnings. And the beauty of this is it's going to show up on basically every applicable interface within Tableau. So you can actually even search and filter to find certified data and ignore data sets with quality warnings. All that means is that there's really no excuse to not realizing this data is actually out of date and probably shouldn't be used, or that there's something that you should be aware of before you dive into this data, because it's pretty much inevitable that you're going to see eventually a little warning sign come up to say, hey, maybe consider using something else, or be aware of these things before you dive in. And at the same time, if you just want to avoid it, you want to get the best data only, you can filter out any data that does have that, those warnings. And so you'll get only the data that's certified or that will be usable in that sense. The next challenge we tend to see is keeping metadata synced. So as we know, metadata is very critical to kind of understanding what your data is. It kind of basically describes all the data that you're dealing with, right? And so having that kind of from the ingestion point all the way to your storing process and to your analytics is key. And so with that, we have the ability to actually utilize the metadata API to basically take in data from, like, if you have an existing catalog like Calibra, to be able to take in that data into Tableau through the APIs. And the beauty of this is you can also send it back to Calibra. So if you make changes within Tableau, it can be sent back to a Calibra and to other data sets, to other catalogs that you may already have active. So it leverages existing things that you may be using today to kind of help you both maintain that connection and also enhance it with maybe changes you make in Tableau. All right. The 6th challenge is, having users trust what they see, right? So this is a fun example I like to show. If it's February 28th and you see this on your milk, would you drink it, right? Like if you're just not sure, like, is this expiring today or did it expire 27 of the other days in February? It can be very risky. And so when you're in the data and analytics space, you're kind of in the middle of a rush, right? People want answers fast, they want stability, and they want safety in many senses. And so we know that data is just only growing in today's world, right? I mean, I think over the last year, we have created like X more times volumes of data than we have ever in our history. And so it's not going to get smaller, it's only going to keep growing. And basically, we need to have kind of data practices in place that are going to allow us to succeed while navigating these challenging situations. And so data details can actually give a lot of kind of relief in that sense. Basically, data details will allow consumers to kind of know a very high level overview of all the things that might be asking about the data, right? Where did it come from? Are these data sources certified? Are there any data quality warnings we might be dealing with? When was this data last refreshed? how are these calculations created, right? And then so basically these dashboards that you're making are going to have those data details that give the user who's maybe using it to collect information the comfort knowing that this data is, you know, potentially certified. It is fairly new, it's fairly refreshed, especially if they're looking at very recent numbers and metrics. And, you know, again, if they do have questions about some of these fields, they can go in and get a better understanding of what those fields look like. So if they are calculations, they can actually see for themselves, you know, how are these fields calculated? Excuse me, is it up to the standard that we've expected? And so, you know, a really good overall experience for them. Seventh challenge here, ungoverned data, right? The last thing you want to do is have a data leak or share data with those who shouldn't be having access to certain data. There's a lot of PII out there. It's very sensitive, and you know, we don't want that out there and about, right? And so having a PII, PHI data manager is critical. Now, I will preface by saying this is actually something that is a professional services engagement. So it actually doesn't come with data management naturally. It's more of something you build out. Naturally, why we would need to engage professional services. I'm not going to spend too much time on talking about it, but basically it does, the only way it can kind of be built is leveraging data management's API capabilities to solve for this, right? So at the end of the day, with data management, if this is a step you'd like to take, if this is something you see as value and you need to have a solution for your PII, then Tableau Professional Services is definitely the place to go when it comes to kind of building out that data manager. And finally, thank you for bearing with me. I know there was a lot of slides here. It's just so much to cover. What happens when data changes are uncommunicated, right? That can become a problem because ultimately, you know, if something had to change, like let's say you had to move data to a new database and now suddenly that database may still have the data for a little bit of time, but it's not going to update any new data. And that's not shared with the users and the consumers and the already existing assets, then people are going to get upset, right? Because they might be looking for the most recent data and they're not getting it, they're getting frustrated, and it can cause a lot of friction within the business. And that's where notifications kind of come into play, right? If someone is using your data source, and let's just say for simplicity, you need to change a column's name. For whatever reason, a column's name needs to be altered. Being able to go through every single person utilizing that data source and having to contact them one by one, I mean, very, very difficult, right? Especially if there's 37 different workbooks using that data source, that's a lot. And so if you can just do this downstream and send an email out to anyone potentially impacted by this, it makes your life and their life so much easier. They can get ahead of it. They don't have to worry about potentially using outdated data or, you know, potentially having their queries break or their calculations break because now column names have changed. And finally, as I mentioned before, automatic data quality warnings. So these are, again, potentially built out by the user, but also Tableau can actually analyze and kind of provide some automatic warnings of their own. In this case, like if data is out of date or if there are problems, you know, for example, if you have a prep flow that runs automatically every week to refresh data and it failed, the user would automatically be notified of that when they access the data set with the little warning saying, you know, potentially the extract for the week of March 10th actually didn't run. So this data is not current up to date. You know, just a warning, again, might not be a deal breaker, but it could be something like if they need the data for that week, they would then reach out to whoever's in charge and say, hey, the data extract failed. We need to update our data for our presentation or for our metrics. Cool. All right, now that I've kind of gone through that, I know it was a lot. I know I may have gone a little fast, so I apologize. Hopefully this demo kind of provides an outline of all the tools and how they function together. I hope it's still up. As I mentioned before, it is a kind of like a test drive, if you will, that we built out for kind of public use. So I will share the link if you guys would like to take a little time to kind of explore it yourselves. Please feel free. So let's kind of begin it here. So as I mentioned, this is kind of the data catalog, the external assets page that you would see with the data management add-on. And this is where you would get kind of a overall summary of all the data sources that you have in your Tableau environment. And, you know, this allows you to kind of go in and be able to dig in specifically into the data. As you can see here, I automatically clicked on this data set, and now you get a lot more detail about this actual data set, right? And it kind of provides all of those features that help instill the trust. You can let the users know that there's something we're doing, we're updating this table, so please be cautious if you're going to be using it today, or if you're going to be using it this month. You can kind of set up those notifications on each of these data sets if you need to, rather than having to communicate that out. You can see our lineage that I was talking about as well. Again, it kind of shows where the data began, kind of what it's gone through, kind of the different data sources that it's become. And now you can see, what all workbooks and dashboards and sheets that it's gone into. And finally, you get to see the owners as well. So if you have questions, you like to learn more, you can always reach out to the owners pretty easily. So you can see here that if I check this box, I can now start to see that my lineage has changed. Obviously, right now I can dig into product ID's lineage. I can understand where it was being used, how it was built out, and maybe even where, like what workbooks are using it. And so this is a very helpful tool. We can explore into the actual flow, kind of how this data set was built, and ultimately how that one variable was built. So it kind of brings that visibility into your data preparation, because you can actually see the flow that was used to create this data set. And that's a really neat functionality. It shows kind of the steps you take. We can set up automatic tasks that run on a schedule, and that can be seen as well by the user, so that, let's say something did go wrong, they would actually see, oh, we had an issue on this flow. Be aware that now X, Y, and Z may be impacted. And the beauty of it is you can split those up so that you're not relying and putting all your eggs in one basket. And so, if you have 4 different outputs and only 3 run, 1 fail, while your data set may not be complete, at least it's not completely unrefreshed. So looking at this, let's take a look at data details a little more. So this is a workbook we built out. By clicking on this newly added data details button, you'll get to see again that quick overview of this data set and of this dashboard. So you get a couple of things, right? You'll get the views of the dashboard again, not really pertaining to the data, more so the workbook, but you'll also get the author, you'll get the project, the workbook, and then you start to see some of the things that pertain to the data itself. So look at our data quality warnings. Go ahead and close out of this. This is the last step here. You can see kind of the data quality warnings that were given. Currently, both of these data sets are under maintenance. And so, they need to be refreshed, and that'll be done at the end of the month. That's very good to know. You'll get to see the data source itself when it was last refreshed. And finally, you'll get to see the fields in use. So again, these are all the fields that built out this dashboard. Do they make sense to you? Are they valid? Is this statement built out correctly? Looks like it is. It's taking a Boolean for order is profitable or not, and basically using an LOD to determine based on the order ID, is the profit greater than 0? Great. It even provides a nice explanation that was written out by the person creating the calculation. So you'll get to see, and you can actually view more to get a better sense of what that looks like, right? So from here, you get an even better, kind of more detailed expression of that calculation. So with that, as I kind of went through that a little quick, time for Q&A. I think I did leave enough time, hopefully, for some questions and answers. Thank you, guys.
Anyone have questions? Or I know that it's really helpful to see. So if you're able to go, if you can send that link to check that out, that's great. One of the great things about this product, I think, is that you don't have to move away from the dashboard that you're looking at. I think, when you're looking at tools, especially if it's the users, the consumers of your dashboards that need to be comfortable with the data, you want to make sure that you have something that they can see while they're in the dashboard. They don't have to go to another system per se, that they can see it in one frame. And it is a beautiful product, like all of the other Tableau products as well. It's really nice to be able to go in and to see the calculations. I find myself sometimes just copying and pasting in a Word document and housing that there. This is so much better. Let's see. And so I have a question. Are there you said that you mentioned Calibra. Are there other, like maybe some products that have more extensive back-end information that Tableau integrates with? Or...
We do have quite a list of options. I don't know off the top of my head, but essentially, if the product has API capabilities, it'll be able to connect to Tableau because we use APIs for our integration.
Great, and I know that that's a good, that's a great option for somebody who's already, maybe you're pretty heavy and you've got a lot of the data architecture done and you've got some tools in there and you have more of the data management and user-friendly options available. That's a great way to go as well. So, all right, let's see. We have a few more minutes if anybody wants to comment or question. Otherwise, well, thank you so much, Jupiter, for presenting. Very informative. And not only did you get information about the tool, but more information on best practices, one source of truth, and just how it helps all around. We are ready to go to our giveaway. We will let you know. I'm not sure if we're going to let you know now, but we do have these 3 books and we will be pulling names and we will have these gifts sent out to you.
Yeah, Olga, I've been tracking the questions and entered those into the drawing. So I have 3 names that I can reveal for those books. So first winner is Richard Spindler. I believe that he had to drop early, so we'll reach out to him and make sure that he gets that book. Our second winner today is Kalika Curry. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing any names here, but Kalika Curry is the second winner. And the third winner is Andrew Madsen. Andrew Madsen is our third winner today. So
all right. Awesome. I'm not sure if you are all on, if you have a preference for a book, this is your chance to get into the chat. So we have the Big Book of Dashboards, Storytelling with Data, Let's Practice, and Makeover Monday book. If you are not, if you don't raise your hand, you will you will get one of those great books. They're all very nice. Okay. We are always looking for presenters. If you want to share your Tableau data journey, your data governance issues, if you want to show a great visual or some analytics that you're doing, we're always looking for presenters, and sharing the information is the best way to do it, I think, is by listening to our peers and what they've done. Sometimes it's just nice to see that somebody comes up with the same challenges, or they know how to get through one of the challenges that you have faced. Please contact us, stay connected. We have a pretty active LinkedIn group. If you aren't a member now, please go there and join us. And then all of our events are listed on our user group events page. And thank you very much. Again, thank you, Theresa, and to Jupiter for presenting a lot of great, valuable information on data governance. And that's a wrap. Okay. Hope everyone has a good day.
thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining us again.